is truth in journalism, where brave men and women gave voice to the voiceless. But then the corporations bought the journalist, poisoning the news that we are fed. With those tainted sources, all we ever ate was a steady diet of status quo. This hijacked narrative is the truth of mass suffering, injustice, and corruption throughout our land. Status quo, status quo, status quo, status quo. To expose this shift to oligarchy came a band of honest journalists. They left the studio and hit the streets to give the microphone back to the people. From sea to sea, the people were empowered to share their truth. Their voices no longer stifled, reclaimed their power. Join the media revolution now.
Hey there, Jordan Sheridan live. It is, what's today? Is it Wednesday or Thursday? I don't even know. I think Thursday, May 7th, 2020. It is a standing kind of day. I am standing and I am saluting. I know as a journalist, I'm not supposed to salute politicians. I will make a slight exception because we have a champion of workers on our program today. We have a champion of human rights on our program today. We have a champion of labor on our program today. We have a champion against the Neanderthal, delinquent, capitalist death cult marchers like Jeff Bezos. And we have a true champion who is not interested in negotiating with Nancy Pelosi, who is not interested in negotiating with Chuck Schumer, who is not interested in crumbs for you and I while the oligarchy eats their cake. We have socialist champion Kshama Sawant on today. That's why I'm a little late. Just finished an interview with her, and it is now, let's see. Oh, it's ready. Let me tell you something. Colin Tooley, I send him long interviews, and he gets that stuff turned around lickety-split for you guys. So thank you to Colin for getting the interview turned around real quick. For those of you that don't know, Kshama Sawant is on the city council in Seattle. She is a loud and proud socialist. She is also somebody who Amazon tried to take out last year. They spent over $1 million to try and defeat Kshama Sawant in Seattle, and they failed. So Kshama Sawant, we spoke about a lot of things. Obviously, coronavirus, COVID. What's the current number? Sadly, over 75,000 Americans have died as Donald Trump and the Republican death cult reopen economies across the country against public health experts and common sense. And Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer continue to sell you out so that we could send money and make profits for private health insurance companies like Cobra. And so now they're talking about literally a bailout for lobbyists. I mean, you can't even make this shit up. You can't make it up. And yes, I am energetic. Thank you, Yi. And I'll be more energetic if you follow the instructions I'm about to give you before we play the interview. We got 150 people watching right now. I need every single person watching right now. Please smash the thumbs up button right under the live stream. It is the thumbs up button right under the live stream. The more people that press the like button, the more people that will see this live stream. Also, it would be pretty good if I had a screen, don't you think? 1 second. Also, make sure you join our text list by typing in COUP. That's COUP to 370-370. Type in COUP to 370-370. Jen is about to send a text so that we could get more people watching, because unfortunately, YouTube, 9 out of 10 times, doesn't notify our subscribers when we're live. So you could get a text by joining our text list. That's 370-370 and type in COUP. It won't charge you anything. You can follow us at Status Coup on the Twitter. We're live there right now. Follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Status Coup. We are live there as well. And join our email list at statuscoup.com. Enter your email there so we could grow. Also, a friendly reminder, obviously we totally get it for those that are struggling or have been laid off. We are very, very close to a major milestone. We are, what is that? 700 and, I'm so bad at math. $788 to go. $788 to go. Is that right? Hold on. God, hate math. You got 100,000 minus 99,312. All right. Oh, $688 to go until we hit $100,000 on the GoFundMe, which is kind of important because I'm talking to Colin right now. I think I need a new computer. I have a laptop, and I just don't think it's gonna last as far as broadcasting live. Having a lot of buffering and that spinning disk that happens on Macs and all that terribleness. I don't think I have enough, I don't want to say it wrong, but memory or bandwidth or whatever is needed on a computer for it to work fast. I don't have it. So I might have to get a desktop, which Colin is getting the info for me, but that's upward. That's probably going to run when all the bells and whistles are added for making it fast. Probably $2,500 to $3,000. So keep on contributing if you can. It is, Nike's starting price for their new desktop is $6,000. They've changed. Well, we're not doing that. So I guess PC might have to be the way. Anyway, keep contributing if you can so that Status Coup could keep the lights on. I'm not going to lie to you. It has not been easy as coronavirus ravages everybody. So definitely contribute in the GoFundMe. There's the link. We need to keep the lights on, and right now we can't go out and report in the field like we normally do. So it really, really helps every GoFundMe contribution, as well as the super chat. So thank you, Swirly Swirl, getting us started, $5. Thank you for interviewing real champions of the people. Thank you for being a real champion, Swirly Swirl. Thank you, love each other, $10. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable, JFK. That is so true. And I think Kshama Sawant, being an outsider and not being in Congress, she has a lot of great views, and she is not afraid to even call out those we consider our own. She does not agree with Bernie Sanders' decision to endorse Joe Biden. She does not agree with the, right now, leaders in Congress that are progressive, essentially, letting Nancy Pelosi enable Republicans to sell us out and have this mass bank heist, which is the corporate bailout. She wants people to fight, and she does not see the progressive movement fighting in Congress against the Democratic establishment that is going along with Republicans to steal from us and screw us during a pandemic. She also has a lot of words for Jeff Bezos of Amazon. So I look forward to airing that for you. I also want to tell you, I don't know when it's going to be released. But apparently Tara Reid, who obviously is a former Biden staffer who has accused him of sexual assault, apparently she has sat down with an interview, not for CNN, MSNBC, any of the usual suspects, but with Megyn Kelly. You know her, the former Santa's white kids, or Santa's not black, he's white. She's now a free agent. She's not working for Fox anymore. She's not working for NBC News anymore. She, I guess, has her own online channel. So Tara Reid sat down. With Megyn Kelly, as well as Rich McHugh, who is a journalist that worked with Ronan Farrow on exposing Harvey Weinstein. They put out a clip from that interview. I don't know when they're putting out the full interview, but obviously we will have a response and reporting follow-up after that interview airs. So we will have that for you. Thank you, Seth Peterson, $10 in the Super Chat. Appreciate it. So hopefully, as we air this interview with Kshama Sawant, you will leave us Super Chats. You will drop a little love in the GoFundMe if you can. I'd love to hit $100,000 today if we can. So keep it coming if you can. By the way, for those of you who have get triggered, anything critical said of Bernie, we're not turning on Bernie. I've seen a few people say, stop turning on Bernie. I'm not, Status Coup is not Bernie Sanders public relations, right? I personally support Bernie Sanders, but I criticized him during the campaign when I felt it was necessary, and I'll criticize him after the campaign where I feel it's necessary. I'm not going off the reservation like some, calling him a sellout and a coward and all these crazy things, but where there's need for criticism, it's fair. And if you can't handle that, then you shouldn't watch Status Coup, because we are not in the tank for any politician, including Kshama Sawant. If she started singing a different tune or doing things we felt were wrong, she's not, protected from any criticism. So, gonna air this interview again. Please, if you like what you're seeing, leave it in the Super Chat, leave it in the GoFundMe. We'll have some thoughts after the interview, and let's get going. Oh, by the way, people were asking, what do we need the new computer for? I broadcast from my computer. We don't have like a live studio. I wish I had cameras and I didn't have to broadcast from my computer. We don't have that. So I broadcast from my computer, and I have a laptop that's 2.5 years old, and it's starting to, I don't know really what the issue is, but it's just not processing fast enough. So we've been getting a lot of buffering. There's been a few instances where I went live and had to close the live stream because of the, if you have a Mac, it starts spinning and the spinning disk. It's been a real disaster. So it is, I don't know. I'm going to have to get probably a desktop rather than a laptop that has a whole lot, a faster processor, more bandwidth. I'm probably saying it wrong. Maybe I'll have Colin do a short video explaining what we need, because he's the tech geek and I'm not. But I love Colin. But that's why I'm going to need a new computer. So support the GoFundMe if you can. Excuse me while the screen goes black, because I didn't. The Kshama Sawant interview wasn't done loading before I launched, so the screen's going to go black as I load it. Remember, please smash that like button so that more people will see this live stream. Without further ado, here is my interview with Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant. Hold on. Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant, who was just reelected last year. I would say nationally, even though she's based in Seattle, is one of the fiercest fighters for the progressive movement and a proud socialist. I wanted to speak with you. Obviously, the health effects are devastating with COVID, but the economic effects and the really continuation of this tale of two cities country we live in is really, really appalling. You have been battling, even before coronavirus, the greed, the basically capture of Washington State, Seattle, and parts of the country by Amazon. We're going to get into Amazon. So can you explain what has Amazon been doing locally in response to COVID? Because we know nationally, essentially, there's just been intimidation of workers, retaliation of workers, and now it seems there's something breaking where they've taken action against your efforts to get them to pay towards relief efforts.
Yeah, so as you correctly mentioned, Jordan, our Amazon tax legislation is actually, if put in place, a very, very modest 1% tax on the 2% of the largest corporations in our city, which by definition means 98% of the businesses would not be taxed. Only the largest, the most profitable, the companies that have the most cash reserves and are the most dominated by millionaires, multimillionaires, and billionaires are the companies that would be taxed. And Amazon obviously is the biggest corporation among them. And we've seen how Amazon as a corporation, on the one hand, it's been profiteering through this crisis while the majority of working people are facing real destitution. We've seen the stunning unemployment numbers that are going to, I think, projected to top the unemployment even in the Great Depression. But on the other hand, so Amazon is profiting during that time, and on the other hand, has adamantly refused to provide even basic protections for their warehouse workers, delivery drivers, and cargo handlers, and in fact has retaliated against workers who have played a whistleblowing role, and better yet, courageously organized walkouts in the warehouse. As you saw the Staten Island warehouse worker Chris Smalls was fired for helping lead a walkout. Other workers in Minnesota and Pennsylvania have been fired in the warehouses. And in Seattle, they've enjoyed a years-long corporate tax haven, Amazon and the other big businesses. And now we're saying enough is enough. We're in a triple emergency of public health, housing affordability, and now jobs crisis. And so we immediately need coronavirus relief in the form of cash assistance for our most affected households. And then starting next year, a big public works program for housing and Green New Deal programs. But what's happened is we've just heard through the city council, most of which serves the interests of big businesses like Amazon, that once again, just like 2 years ago, they've carved out a backdoor deal where now the city council and the governor's office, they are united in saying that this legislation doesn't fit the purview of emergency policies that the city council should pass. And for me, that is not only, it's absolutely false, and it's also bizarre. How can an emergency legislation to address the emergency not fall under the purview of emergency policies? It's completely filled with lies, and it's a rotten approach, and it's reminiscent of what they did in 2018, where they repealed the tax that they had all unanimously voted on.
Right. And also, looking at it just common sense, Amazon employs so many people in Seattle. So by working right now, those workers, even though many of them are white collar in Seattle, their health is being put at risk. So why wouldn't Amazon need to be contributing to their workers in Seattle, in addition to nationally, but also to the entire greater Seattle region, Washington State, because Amazon has enjoyed incredible perks. There's no income tax in Washington State, which is very regressive. Jeff Bezos has fought a proposed wealth tax years ago and successfully won. So who else is going to contribute towards the people's bailout, if not Jeff Bezos and Amazon?
Exactly. And all the points you said, Jordan, are not only spot on in general, nationally and globally in the context of this capitalist system, but especially if you look at the situation in Seattle. Seattle has this dubious distinction of having the nation's most regressive tax system, meaning the tax haven that Jeff Bezos and other billionaires and multimillionaires enjoy here is even better for them, nicer for them than in other cities and states. So if there ever was a case for progressive revenues through taxing big business and the wealthy, it's here in Seattle. And so you can see how in the middle of this pandemic, they say it's not the right time to tax them. 2 years ago, when we didn't have a pandemic, but we did have a housing emergency, they said it was not the right time to tax them. So in other words, it's really revealing the character of the elite. And this is what you see in a deeply unequal system like capitalism. They will say that we are in this together, but all their actions prove quite the contrary, that we are not actually in this together. Even the public, first of all, just the health crisis and the loss of life, that's not politically neutral. It's no coincidence that very densely populated working class and poor immigrant neighborhoods in Queens are part of the hotspots of the coronavirus crisis. It is where people have the lowest form of health protection, food availability, and jobs and incomes to make sure that they're able to survive health-wise. That's where the crisis hits the most. And then on top of that, as you said, it's not just public health, it's also a jobs emergency. And we are not going to create jobs unless we expand public sector union jobs through infrastructure building and repairing, through building of affordable permanently affordable social housing through Green New Deal programs. And just one other thing I'll add is that our movement in Seattle is not in any way isolated. Recently, there's been a very important petition that has been put forward by climate scientists and climate activists, including Bill McKibben and Naomi Klein. This is a petition directed towards the US Congress, which says that we are facing all these multiple emergencies, climate related, public health related, economic inequality related, and they're not all separate emergencies. They're all flowing from the dysfunctional system of capitalism, and that to address this, we need trillions of dollars of a New Deal kind of package. And so we are in good company. It's not just about Seattle. Nationally and globally, we are seeing real urging of these kinds of actions. But I would also say the lessons of the Great Depression and the aftermath of the Great Depression show that the establishment of the Democratic and Republican parties, regardless of their differences, will absolutely not act on any of these programs, because to fund these programs, the starting point is taxing big business. That is the starting point. Without that, you don't, it's not like a magic money tree. It has to come from those who have the most, those who have exploited the rest of us for decades. And what you see from the Great Depression's lessons is that it was years after 3 to 5 years after the Great Depression, when we had militant labor organizing led by socialists, which led to general strike actions, which then finally forced the FDR government to enact the New Deal. That's the kind of momentum we need in our country now.
I think you bring up a great point, because the zeitgeist right now is everything went to hell with Donald Trump. Everything was fine before. We just have to get rid of him. I don't care if it's a paper bag that can't construct a sentence. We're going with the Democrats.
Or even someone accused of sexual violence.
Correct. But I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. The governor of Washington State, Jay Inslee, is a Democrat. The mayor of Seattle is a Democrat. The city council run by Democrats. And it seems common sense that not just Jeff Bezos, but Boeing, Starbucks, a lot of other companies based out of the Pacific Northwest would have to massively contribute here. Why? I think I know the answer, but why is Jay Inslee, the Seattle mayor, and Democrat politicians basically saying, no, not an emergency to tax Amazon, and we can't touch big business?
I think you've hit on the right note, in the sense that on the one hand, it is absolutely true that Trump has been an abysmal president by any measure. Not only the track record that he came with in terms of his really rapacious business policies and his own track record of sexual violence and sexual assault, but on the other hand, and plus his completely incompetent response to this COVID-19 crisis. But on the other hand, as you correctly said, it's not like everything was heavenly until he came to power. In fact, the very reason he came to power is because people have been fed up with corporate politics, and when they were not provided a real left-wing fighting working class option to vote for, Trump ended up getting elected by a combination of people becoming fodder to his right-wing populist ideas and people just not voting. This is what happened in 2016. But the reality is that the situation that people are facing right now, it is not just because of the coronavirus and because of the unemployment right now. It is also the product of a decades-long robbing and exploiting of working class people. And that has come in many dimensions. It has come in the form of stagnating and lowered wages, which is why you have, this incredible moment in history where in the richest country in the history of humanity, you have an entire generation, the millennial generation, that is actually worse off economically than their parents' generation. That being worse, the new generation being worse off than the older generation, that represents a highway robbery that has been conducted through slashing of wages, slashing of unions and union rights, which means you don't get the kind of wages or benefits that the union movement fought for in the past. It has come in the form of perpetuation of business unionism, where the labor leaders are not fighting in the way that they need to fight. And we're going to have to revive the strong labor traditions of fighting for workers and understanding that the bosses are not on your side. And this brings up the dimension of the Democrats as well, that as long as the labor movement is tied to the Democratic Party, with leaders like Inslee, the Democratic council members here in Seattle, Andrew Cuomo in New York, who maybe a few shades different than Trump, but at the end of the day, what they all have in common is their diehard allegiance to Wall Street and big business and the billionaire class. And to your question, that is exactly why they will not pass policies like the Amazon tax in order to make sure that people, working people are held afloat. They will extract the price from us unless we fight back. I just wanted to give you a concrete example of this as well. In the wake of the 2008 Great Recession, there were nearly 8 million foreclosures of middle class and working class homes. In other words, it was a massive devastation of home equity that was owned by ordinary people that is never going to come back on the basis of capitalism. So what we see recessions are written in the DNA of capitalism, but also what happens in the aftermath of recessions is important. That not only the immediate price of the recession is put on the backs of working people, but the capitalist class also uses recessions as an opportunity to snatch away reforms that we have won in the past. So building home equity for the middle class, that was something that was won through the New Deal reforms and the labor movement that has now been snatched back. Younger people have no hope of buying homes. They're barely able to pay rent in roommate situations. And similarly, we're going to see the same kind of cost extracted unless we fight back.
And even more imminently, beyond just Amazon not being forced to contribute, by them never facing any consequence for anything, they are, and Jeff Bezos is endangering public health. I mean, if he's not, I've spoken with, I've been getting tips and direct messages from Amazon workers in Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey. They don't all have proper masks. They don't all have gloves. There's been some sinks that have been, don't use this sink. They're all in break rooms packed like sardines. They are the ones touching the boxes going to millions of Americans all over the country, and not through the fault of the workers, but through the greed and not wanting to just provide the proper equipment. We don't know everything about this virus. We don't know how long it could live on surfaces or on boxes.
Right.
So they're basically, because of Bezos not doing the right thing here, workers are mailing out things that could be getting Americans sick.
Absolutely. I think that's a really eloquent description of the complete dysfunctionality of the capitalist system, where if you have a system that exists to fuel the endless greed of a few people at the top, it exposes people to devastation in so many different ways that are not immediately visible. And one of the ways in which this could happen, the spread of this virus, which we know very little about even now, is exactly in the way you said. And in fact, the workers at Amazon, the warehouse workers, the delivery drivers, the cargo handlers, the security personnel, custodial workers, cafeteria workers, all of these workers are on the front lines of, having to put their own lives at risk because Amazon, this $1 trillion corporation, won't shell out pennies, literally pennies for them to be able to provide workers with basic protection. I mean, we've talked to, just like you said, you have, Jordan, we've talked to cargo handlers and delivery drivers here in the Seattle area, and they will tell you that they haven't even received hand sanitizer bottles, the dispensers, for basic disinfectant. They have not received gloves. They were also, like you said, they had these stand-up meetings where they were all packed like sardines. At the time when it was well known that we needed to have social distancing, at the time that the governor had already put in place stay-at-home policies. So well-off people and well-off workers are able to keep themselves safe at home, but then even they are not safe because there's this sort of contagious mechanism that is at play because capitalism cannot actually address the crisis. Because in order to address a crisis like COVID-19, you need a system that is based on cooperation and collaboration among all people who are equal, we don't have that situation. And that's why, in many ways, the crisis that we are seeing, especially this is especially highlighted in the context of Amazon, because it's such a huge corporation. Jeff Bezos is now apparently on track to become the world's first trillionaire by 2026. I mean, can you even imagine what a billion is in your head, let alone a trillion? I mean, this is just completely wacky. We should be rejecting a system that can create a trillionaire, on its face, at the same time that people are dying because they don't have food. That system should be rejected. And the only way to provide a vision for an alternative to this Amazon type of vision is to understand that we cannot build this on the basis of lifestyle choice, in the sense that we should not be condemning people for buying packages from Amazon, especially now when they're being told stay at home, keep everyone safe by not going out. So they're doing the right thing by ordering online. So we have to remember, Jeff Bezos is not about to become a trillionaire because he invented online shopping, much less the internet. He did neither. He is not the one building the software for the system that is kept alive for online shopping. It's the tech workers. Who's delivering the packages? It's the delivery drivers and cargo handlers. Who's handling the packages and preparing them for delivery? It's the warehouse workers. So it's this army of workers that is doing all the work, the logistics sector, and who's reaping the benefits? A few people at the top, Jeff Bezos and his cronies. So really, for me, this is a reminder that in order to provide a different vision of a socialist world, we have to concretely point out that the problem with Amazon is not that it exists and provides these services, but that it is privately owned and it is geared towards profit making for the very top at the expense of workers and the community, as you said. So we need the democratic public ownership of corporations like Amazon so that all the resources can be geared towards social good, especially in times of pandemics like this one.
And I'd like to ask you, I met you last year when I covered the exploding homeless problem in Seattle, which in large part to companies like Amazon. I think rent has gone up. I mean, different estimates, but like 50 to 70% in the last 5 years. Obviously, the homeless are extremely vulnerable right now to COVID. Andrew Cuomo in New York, has kind of depicted them as trash that needs to be removed from the subway. When I was in Seattle, champions like you have been trying to help the homeless, but not the Democratic Party. What is being done right now to try and protect the homeless who are very vulnerable to coronavirus, but also, get them off the streets? Obviously, they would be carriers if other people are near them.
It's absolutely correct to look at the impact of the crisis right now, the COVID-19 crisis, in light of the problems, that the deep social problems that existed pre-existed before this pandemic. And when you were there, yes, absolutely, there has been a raging homelessness crisis, which has only gotten exacerbated since you were here, for the simple reason is that, as you said, when rents are skyrocketing, you have a continuous pipeline towards homelessness. So not only are the services for those who are homeless right now completely underfunded and have been gutted towards over the years, but not only that, there are people who weren't homeless before who've become homeless now. Since you visited, more people have become homeless because they can't keep up with the rents. The rents are increasing so rapidly that people are barely managing to survive. And most people have been one paycheck or one rent increase or one other financial shock away from being forced to couch surf, being forced to double up with family. But those options run out because everybody's under pressure, and then you're out on the streets. So in other words, it is an inhumane system where politicians like Cuomo talk about homeless people as completely indispensable because these are our neighbors, these are our community members. And as long as we don't address the housing crisis, we are going to see homelessness. And I don't believe that this can be addressed on the basis of capitalism, but under capitalism, it is our duty to build mass movements to fight for and win major reforms. And one of the reforms, as you know, is this Amazon tax legislation that we're pushing for, because a big part of this program is, to use the revenues that would be generated by taxing corporations like Amazon in order to build permanently affordable rent-controlled social housing. And it is the expansion of social housing which will ultimately make a dent in the homelessness crisis, because as long as housing is a commodity that exists to make profits for corporate developers and property management corporations, housing is not going to become affordable. It has to be publicly owned and controlled.
And lastly, obviously, you're not in Congress, but to me, this looks like a major opportunity for the progressive movement. I mean, a lot of times you don't see mass strikes because people inherently, by human nature, are afraid to lose their jobs or lose their health care. But right now, a lot of people have nothing to lose. I mean, the numbers are astronomical. 33 million at this point that unemployed. Does not include furloughed workers, people having their hours cut. But nationally, I mean, obviously Bernie, has made his decision. He endorsed Biden. I see a lot of tweeting among progressives, but I don't see a lot of organizing among progressive leaders. Just tweeting what needs to happen. Rashida Tlaib has put forward a bill. Congresswoman Jayapal has put forward a bill. But I don't see Bernie or AOC organizing their massive army between the email lists and just the following to demand a freeze on rents, not retroactively paying them back, but just pausing it, or demanding, like Europe, that our government could give 1.5 trillion in 5 minutes for tax cuts. That we right now, the government should cover payrolls. What do you see as the opportunity right now, and why do you think it is that these progressive leaders seem to be afraid to challenge Speaker Pelosi and the Democrats' feeble response?
I think you've asked an extremely important question, and this is going to become only more important as the months go by and the crisis keeps getting worsened, is the question of how do we get organized in order to win a different kind of society coming out of this pandemic that works for the majority of society, not to make sure that the very rich at the top keep increasing their wealth. And I think it's on the one hand, we're going to see very likely a little bit of a stunning and demoralizing effect in the coming months as working people understandably grapple with the crisis stretching in front of their eyes with no incomes, and people who have jobs will feel afraid, as you said, to organize in the workplaces, because the bosses may tell them, well, if you organize and I fire you, I have so many millions of workers to hire from. So it is understandable if there's a feeling of fear and demoralization that sets in. But on the other hand, I think you're absolutely right that this moment also reveals the complete lack of real leadership, both in the labor movement and among so-called progressive politicians. And I have to say, I enthusiastically endorsed Bernie Sanders, even though he ran as a Democrat, which I disagree with, because I think that the immediately working people need our own political party, and this pandemic has made that even more clear. But I enthusiastically endorsed Bernie Sanders because there's, as you said, there's millions of people who were excited and electrified by his campaign, his call for Medicare for all, to end student debt by taxing Wall Street. And it's deeply unfortunate and historically unfortunate that Bernie Sanders has decided to endorse Joe Biden. He has said that from the beginning, and from the beginning I disagreed with him. I have let him know personally that I don't agree with this decision, because it is not his personal decision. That kind of decision means there's no real direction for those millions of people who were following that campaign. And it's also a reminder, it's a reminder, one, that the Democratic Party doesn't work for us. It's the graveyard of social movements. We need our own political party. But furthermore, it also presents the ineffectiveness of simply having an electoral approach, every 4 years. It doesn't work that way. And I think our experience from Socialist Alternative, having won 3 elections in Seattle and having won concrete victories like the historic $15 an hour, and now having a real momentum, a serious momentum for the Amazon tax, what it shows is an example of how, when you have elected positions that are a product of grassroots movement building through independent politics that is independent of the Democratic establishment and corporate cash, then you can use your elected positions in service of movement. But ultimately, the only power I have as one socialist on the city council, and the reason we've been able to win historic victories, is because there are mass movements that are happening on the ground, and because my office is rooted in those mass movements, and because my office is used in service of those mass movements. So in other words, the key operative phrase here is mass movements. Without that, we've got nothing. And that is why at this historic moment, it is necessary that the labor leadership shed its rotten ideas of business unionism, of trying to collaborate with the bosses and eke out a few crumbs for workers. Shed that, put that aside, and really, as you said, not just send emails, but organize workers into massive workplace strike actions. Strategically, essential and frontline workers like healthcare workers and Amazon workers are in a really good position to begin that fight back. And workers are courageously showing that. Non-union workers at Amazon and Instacart have shown that courage. Black sanitation workers in Pittsburgh, who are Teamsters members, but whose leadership didn't really stand with them, organized an illegal wildcat strike against bad conditions for them as sanitation workers. So my point is that there are so many glimmers of incredible courage by rank and file workers. And I think what needs to happen is either the labor leadership gets its act together, or we need to sweep it aside and have new rank and file leadership emerge. But we will need militant leadership if the working class is going to win something out of this crisis.
I lied, one more. So just to play devil's advocate, because I know I have a lot of older Democrats in my life that, will hear this and say, look, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, not to get you in trouble, because she's obviously represents Seattle too. She just did an interview and said, well, it's easy to be an outside activist where you could be pure. It's harder to be in the halls of Congress where you have to compromise and things like that. So what do you say to people that would criticize that position and say, well, what did you want Bernie Sanders to do? Vote no against the corporate bailout? Because if you voted no, then there's no unemployment benefits. So he had to vote for the corporate bailout to get the crumbs that ended up being delivered. And these other progressive politicians who it seems like the mantra is, well, we have to capitulate on the bad stuff just to get the crumbs.
Well, I think that whole position is derived from a complete lack of confidence in working class organizing and a complete lack of vision of what can be possible if you got the masses organized, and also a reluctance and an unwillingness to get that organized. And I think that ultimately flows from tacit or overt acceptance that capitalism is the only system we can have, and the best thing I can do is keep someone more conservative than myself from getting elected in my position, and for me to eke out the crumbs, as you were saying. But if you limit your vision to if you believe that the best that can be done is win a few crumbs while, having massive slices of the pie being stolen from working people on a basis of, it's not just about electoralism, it's about being tied to the establishment. If that's what you think is all can be achieved, then yes, then in your logic, that is going to be the correct approach, and that's going to be the best approach, and you're going to reject any kind of real organizing by rank and file workers and by grassroots workers. However, if you flip that on its head and look at what all has the working class lost because of this approach. I mean, just to give you a concrete example, you mentioned Boeing earlier. A few days after I was first elected in 2013, Boeing executives, not the workers were sold out in this deal. The Democratic-led legislature gave Boeing executives what came to be and still is the single largest corporate handout in US history. It was almost $9 billion. And that was done, again, the logic that you described, that was the exact logic that was presented to the workers and to the community, that look, if we don't give this deal, then we're not going to get the few crumbs that we can get. And you know what those crumbs were? The promise that no jobs would be cut in Washington state. In other words, pitting the workers in Washington state against the workers in South Carolina and saying, if we give Boeing this $9 billion deal, they've promised us not to cut the jobs here. Do you know what happens? What has happened since 2013? Boeing has cut 13,000 jobs from Washington State. So this story is, I'm sharing this story with the purpose of conveying that even those crumbs that are supposedly going to come from that kind of bankrupt strategy, those crumbs are not won if you accept that, because it is a race to the bottom. You accept this compromise, you're going to lose this, and that compromise is going to force you to accept another compromise, and you're going to lose more. And that compromise, so in other words, it's a mountain of compromises on this failed logic of capitalism. And it's up to workers for whom the system is not working to decide, we don't agree with these politicians. We don't agree with the talking heads who tell us that this is the best we can achieve. Because if you look at the gains that were won in the past, they were not won by politicians like Jayapal who said, let's accept crumbs. They were won by militant labor organizers, many of whom were socialists, were Trotskyists in the 1930s. And they did the hard work of organizing their co-workers. And it was a product of that day-to-day grind of organizing and real courage. The labor movement literally took beatings from the police, from the National Guard. The initial organizers of the labor movement were literally killed and maimed. And they took on all of this because they knew that ultimately, without organizing the working class, we have no hope of changing society. And if you accept that this current society is not working for us, then we have to shed these old ideas. And unfortunately, I have to say, for the younger generation, they have to fight for their rights for a sustainable society. And if older people don't agree with that, then that doesn't make them right. That just makes them people who are an obstacle to social change. And so it's really, in order to be able to unite people, we have to present an inspiring vision of what can be achieved, rather than accepting this sort of tired old vision of crumbs that often are not even achievable in themselves.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I very rarely tell my audience to support a politician because it's inappropriate as a journalist. I will tell them to support you. The audience might not know, but Jeff Bezos and Amazon, I believe, spent over $1 million this past election to remove you from the city council. I remembered getting an alert that you lost originally, which was incorrect. You started coming back over the next few days and ultimately prevailed. And that was not without a strong fight, because again, Amazon poured in over $1 million to a local city council race to remove your voice and remove your fight. So I think it's extremely important. They'll probably double that next time, maybe triple that next time. So I hope people, whatever they could do, continue to support you, because I think your voice is so important. And thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Really appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com, where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you. That was Seattle City Council member Kshama Sawant, a champion of the progressive movement and a loud and proud socialist. And frankly, might upset some people, but I think she's right. I would like to see more aggressive leadership from Bernie, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, Ilhan Omar. I don't know who else I'm missing here. Tulsi Gabbard. It's great to tweet what is needed right now. It's great to put forth legislation, but if the leader of the Democratic Party in Congress, Nancy Pelosi, isn't going to do any of it, why are you just sitting idly by saying, okay, well, yes, ma'am, yes, Miss Speaker? No, publicly challenge her. We are in an unprecedented time right now. We are really, really looking at potential Great Depression level unemployment, Great Depression level suffering economically, not to mention the rising death toll. Why is the progressive leaders, when in Congress, the Senate, in the House, why are they basically tweeting and doing live streams rather than organizing the troops? Because Nancy, Chuck, and the manufacturing consent cabal will blame you if Trump wins, they're gonna blame you anyway if Trump wins. You might as well get something for it. This doesn't mean I don't love Bernie Sanders and don't respect the others, but we shouldn't just like close our eyes, count to 10, and ignore if progressive leaders aren't doing what is needed. The reason that Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump are being enabled to basically execute one of the biggest bank robberies in human history, which is the coronavirus bailout, is because the Democrats are feebly allowing it. That's why. The Democrats are going along with it. Sure, they talk about oversight and critical that there's no oversight. They're the ones that signed on to this travesty of a coronavirus package. $6 trillion bailouts for Boeing and these companies that don't need it. Are you kidding me? Swirly Swirl, $20. That was a great interview. We need more of her. Well, we got other great interviews coming. So not only should you super chat, but please, please, please keep it up, keep it coming in the GoFundMe. We have Nina Turner tomorrow. We're going to have her. We also have Paula Jean Swearingen, a progressive who ran in 2018 for the West Virginia Senate, is running again now this year for West Virginia Senate, a coal miner's daughter, a great, great progressive down in West Virginia. So we're going to be interviewing her. Also going to be interviewing Dave Dayen from the American Prospect, who's been writing a great, great daily column during coronavirus called Unsanitized, which has really been exposing the tentacles of this corporate bailout and who is selling you out. He's naming names. He's breaking a lot of stories. So I'm going to be interviewing him. So we're going to have Nina Turner, Paula Jean, Dave Dayen, and whoever else I could get in the next couple days. So definitely listen. I get it. People are struggling themselves. If you don't have any extra money to throw towards independent journalism right now, that's okay. If you do have anything, even $5, drop it right there in the GoFundMe. Because frankly, Status Coup is feeling it just like you. The updated number now is 1,815 members. So we have lost over 100 members so far during coronavirus. A lot of them have been so kind to tell us, we wish we could stay, but we've lost our jobs, or whatever the case may be. So we totally get it. So we are pushing our GoFundMe to kind of offset these costs, because we definitely, I need a new computer, which I have to talk to Colin and Jen and figure out what the best cost solution is. But I need a new computer. Obviously, we got to still pay Jen and Colin and myself, trying not to cut anybody's pay. So hopefully we could keep the GoFundMe going. And we also need other things. We're looking at upgrading our live view, which is the mobile camera unit we use when we're in the field. We could get a discount right now for a live view, since the economy is kind of screwed. Live view is offering us the top of the line one. If we trade in our current live view for the top of the line one, we could get it for $8,000. It would normally be near $16,000. So we're probably going to do that, but it would really help to raise more money to offset the costs. But we really want this top of the line live view, because when it's safe and when we get the green light, if we have the top of the line live view, then we could pretty much broadcast from anywhere, including remote areas like Navajo Nation, which I'm interested in going to report on the ground about the disastrous effects COVID is having on indigenous communities like Navajo Nation. Obviously, the environmental fights that Navajo Nation is engaged in, poverty, a lot of different things that I've wanted to cover on the ground for a long time. Navajo Nation, as well as we'd love to cover other indigenous communities. Might have to go down to Georgia when the case is, when it's safe to do so, and cover. I did an interview yesterday, the outrageous execution on camera in the broad daylight of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging. I guess it's now illegal to jog while black in America. He was gunned down and shot by a father-son duo. No justice yet, I'm not particularly hopeful that there's going to be justice. I'd like to go down there and cover that. There's a lot of things we want to cover, so anything you could do. The minimum on GoFundMe is $5. We really appreciate any contribution, and we're just going to keep on keeping on right here at Status Coup. Again, I'm interviewing Status Coup. Try getting Benjamin Dixon, Talib Kweli, Killer, Mike, just to ask them about the black community. Got to try bridging that gap more to beat the establishment. I agree. Like I said, we're going to have Nina Turner tomorrow. We're also going to have Philip Agnew next week. He was a senior advisor to Bernie and a great African-American organizer who became an advisor to Bernie. So we're trying to branch out, get new guests. So definitely stay tuned for his, I'm going to try to do more interviews since we can't go out in the field. Try to do as many interviews as I can via Skype. Steady Drummer $4.99. I just watched the YouTube ad for you, the Epoch Times, LOL. Thank you for suffering through that. Yes, for those of you who are willing to deal with it, if you don't just skip the ad, if you let ads run for a little bit, we get additional revenue, which we could use. So thank you for watching. We will cut this up. We'll cut up the Kshama Sawant interview into probably 2 or 3 videos, so they could get shared on social media. Again, we'll have an interview with Nina Turner tomorrow, as well as Dave Dayan. And definitely, if you have people you think we should interview, definitely email us at info@statuscoup.com. That's info@statuscoup.com. Would love to hear who you would like to hear from. And who knows? The GoFundMe goes all day, so maybe we could get to $100,000 before I go live tomorrow. I do believe in miracles. We are now, what is that? $658 away. $658 away from the promised land of $100,000, which is pretty damn amazing. To think that we raised $100,000. The largest donation we've had was $5,000 from a viewer in Arizona. We haven't had donations from fat cat billionaires, no banks, no fossil fuckers, no real estate, no big pharma, no Silicon Valley. It's all been you. And some of you have donated probably 50 to 100 times individually. So thank you. I will see you